Let's talk about this housing reduction plan, not reduction.
Production.
Production,
Yes.
sorry. What's that all about?
So the housing production plan is a state requirement, okay, and it's about the outline of how a community gets to its 10%, and that is 10% of year-round units based on the decennial census. So it's not a rolling thing, like it's not every year, or it's based on the decennial census for that next 10 years. Okay.
So we're looking back at 2010.
Correct.
For our guidance.
Right. So we're at about 2% where we've been for a long time. We need an additional somewhere around 369 or so units. The housing production plan, with that approved, if you make progress, at least, got to remember now, I think it's 1% of that, you get a 2-year freeze, basically, before it re-ups again. So you could basically turn down a 40B during that time, as long as you're actually in production mode adding these units. Okay. So it's...
now, are these affordable units by the legal definition of affordable housing units, or?
Legally, by that definition, we are focused now on rental housing, because in a rental project, 25% of the units have to meet the definition, so they are priced at a point where a household earning 80% of the median can afford it. But all the units in that development count towards that, what's called the subsidized housing inventory list. So with an ownership project, only the units that you build count. But in a rental project, all the units in the development, even the quote market rate ones, which are going to households that earn more than 80%, count towards our ultimate 10% goal. So I don't know if you've had the Richmond people in, their proposal
not
for...
recently, but yeah, we have.
Yeah. Their proposal that went before town meeting, which would create 225 rental units, all of those units will count. So that would, if those are built, that would bring us up to about 7%. So
even though they don't solve the affordable housing issue, really.
Even though
but a 40B doesn't either, right?
Well, it doesn't completely,
because the 40B has the same sort of 10% or some percentage requirement that they be affordable, and the rest can be market. Is that not true?
25%, right, are those 80%. The rest have to be market rate.
Right.
So it depends on what the market rate.
Sure. But, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is what I'm trying to work through in my head is that it is a step in the right direction. Is it going to really solve the problem? Probably not.
Well, I think
it solves our legal problem.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily solve the actual situation.
Well, I think you and I agree on that we need more rental apartments.
Right.
We need more rental units. What I was surprised to see in the housing production plan is that we've actually, during a time when we've gained population, we've lost year-round units.
Right.
So what does that tell you? That more units, we've heard anecdotal stories, certain areas, now the house that used to be rented is gone to a seasonal use, but this sort of bears that out.
Right.
That, so what we're left with is the remaining houses are either more overcrowded, right, or there's more demand, or there's more illegal units somehow being, created.
Right.
So we do have a supply issue, and I think it's, more of the apartment type uses that maybe don't lend themselves to the seasonal demand as much, are what we need.
But the zoning code doesn't really lend itself to apartment uses either, does it?
We've made some changes to the bylaw, and when I say we, it's everybody, because there was a time when town meeting was very resistant to that. But over the past year, town meeting has voted to allow smaller apartment buildings, 6, 8 units. The area around the Stop and Shop is one area where it's been liberalized. We haven't seen a big response yet. It does usually take a couple years for people to understand the bylaw and propose something. We have allowed apartments in mixed-use developments, like where there's a commercial development on the first floor. We've allowed more than 2 up on the second floor, and we have seen people putting those in. In some of the industrial projects, employee housing put above the industrial bays on the first floor.
What about, for example, that new store that's going in at the corner of Old South and Amelia?
Yes, that's
Is that
four
a good-
apartments that would be up above there. So, in general, that corridor, we had done an earlier allowance of up to 4 apartments and saw, the market respond to that. Mr. Shapiro built 4-unit buildings closer to town in that area, and those have been rented, and those have been a good housing supply issue there.
So there are some bright spots.
There are. We need to do a little more to get that going, but I do see some progress.
And
Yeah,
of course, the cost of construction has become a major issue for this kind of project too.
that's right. Continues to go up. Yeah,
And the availability of people to
do the work.
construction,
Absolutely
as we all know when we try to get somebody to come and do something for us.
true.
Back to the HDC for a minute, because the administration of that falls under your jurisdiction, I believe. It's interesting, you're talking about Matticat and their role. A few years ago, I pointed out to a member of the HDC that, in fact, the character of Old Matticat was changing because of the pitch requirements on the roof. And this person said to me, "Oh, I didn't realize that." I said, "Go out and take a look." Now, how are we sort of protecting against that sort of straying, if you will, from the straight and narrow path of historic recreation?
Well, right. I mean, I think the key to that is one-size-fits-all rules, need to be avoided here. And so to say you have to have a certain pitch and that's it, I think kind of ignores some of the existing character. Right. So this is a clear area where the Matticat Advisory Group can come up with different standards. One of I think the recent additions is they added the Fisher's Landing in as well. So again, those are both areas that would be added to the sewer. They would now be subject to that review. So the HGC's, it's a subjective call on this. It should be based on guidelines. It should be based on, identifying that character. That's something, that I think we're certainly interested in developing that, getting maybe some more standards in place. We have a new staff person with a historic preservation degree who has done his own restoration, so he's a hands-on person as well as has the training. So he had his first meeting this week, and I know he's pretty excited to work with them. So, which is a good thing.
Yes, very good.
Yeah.
Anything else going on in your world out there that people would like to know about?
Let's see. We did just finish with the hospital. One of the last pieces for the hospital to move forward was settled last night about trading some land and looking at that intersection at Sparks and Atlantic and Prospect. The hospital owns some land that was critical to looking at an intersection reorganization there, and they agreed to convey that in return for the land that they got.
Which corner is that? Is it on the hospital corner, the corner of Prospect and Surfside Road, basically?
Yes. So they own property on the side where Sparks and Atlantic come together, and they agreed to certain easements along that side in return for the land that they got from the town. So that's an important piece on getting the land necessary there. What we're looking at is a mini roundabout at that location that again would line those intersections up and prevent the kind of torturous turn that causes a lot of backup there.
Right.
At least I know that we heard, I think I know what I heard from the the group that speaks in the summer, they talked about a lot of these traffic issues where they really want to see some improvements,
Right.
and we certainly do as well. It's time, I think, for some implementation on those.
I think it is. I remember talking to I can't think of his name, the traffic planner.
Mike Burns?
Mike Burns,
Yeah.
thank you. A couple of months ago, and that's the thing, as I was thinking about it afterwards, the thing that sort of left me a little dismayed was the amount of time, the lead time that's required to get these things done. Not so much the engineering and design, but just the prioritization and the,
Right.
and I know there are a lot of other issues that have to be dealt with, and part of it's financial, of course. But
Right.
but is there an effort to try to speed up some of these solutions that he was talking about?
Yeah, I think that, well, a lot of what he works on is getting us in the queue for state money for construction, okay? So what that means is that the town has to finish the design on its own funding, has to finish the design and any right-of-way issues, and then go to the state and say, okay, now our project is ready. And then the state says, okay, where will we plug you in these various fiscal years, which might be 4 or 5 years out. In the past, we have used our own capital funding to advance things, not waited
Right.
for the state process. We're one of the smallest regions in the entire state, so we don't receive a lot of funding. So typically it's 3 or 4 years cobbled together for one project, and that, will lead to delays, basically. I know that we would have waited for years for the Old South Road bike path, and we, at the
Just
time,
did it.
said, we're going to town meeting, we're asking for the funding, and we'll build it ourselves. And in a lot of ways, it's built faster, it's built less expensively, and then it's done. So
What's happening with the Bartlett Road, Surfside Road roundabout? Is that moving forward?
it is. We have received, or we have acquired the land that we needed, so the right-of-way is all intact there. We are trying to move that. It's currently on an out year at the state level, and we're trying to move that up now that basically that the land is acquired, and I believe we have design money this year. So that will, again, hopefully in the next couple of years, that will move forward.
Okay, good. I just want to, in conclusion, move back to the Matticat Sewer Project and just sort of summarize what I took to be your view, and if I'm wrong, tell me. But essentially, I understand that from the planning department's perspective, everything has been done from a zoning point of view that can be done to, if you will, protect the character of the community out there, and was done in connection with the water extension out to Matticat a few years ago.
Right.
And that the sewer project shouldn't make that much difference at this point in terms of density.
Right. Density is really handled by zoning. So if there's other things, we certainly have another town meeting, probably a couple town meeting schedules if there's further, discussions that need to be had about possible zoning changes.
But the issue is, of course, if people come in and file their plans and get grandfathered.
Well, you're only grandfathered for dimensional requirements for three years, basically. And we saw none of that when the zoning change happened in 2009. It was really, again, if it's usually a strong neighborhood-based effort, there's pretty much buy-in. So if there are changes, we're certainly open to hearing them, but we did substantial reductions. You have to be within reason here. You can't, zone, make everything non-conforming, for example. But if there's further reductions, we can certainly talk about that. There's more than enough time to do that. And basically, you should never use utilities to control your development. You need to, address it through zoning and make sure your water quality and other things are handled through, sewer.
But you're confident that the zoning is in a position to handle it?
I think it is, but I'm always open to other ideas.
Great. Andrew Vorce, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.